In a small town, John Lithgow has banned all forms of dancing, but fear not, dear viewers, because Kevin Bacon is riding in on a tractor to save the day and bring back the groove for all. Today we're talking about Footloose. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I like that shirt. They sell men's clothing where they get that shirt.
That'd probably be funnier if I was wearing anything other than a basic t-shirt.
I'm sorry, I can't predict your wardrobe on the day of recording. My bad.
Oh, I'm sorry, David. What episodes have we ever recorded where I'm not wearing a t-shirt?
When you wear a tie.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, it's either a t-shirt or a shirt and tie. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, welcome everyone. It's a movie podcast. We get together and we are working through dance movie season, which is David's fault. And we are on Footloose this week, so another 80s classic dance movie. A lot of the big ones are from the 80s for whatever reason. It was big in that decade.
The Reagan years, man. Got to dance it out.
It was the only way people could let out their emotions was through dance.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they get their passion out. So
this movie exemplifies that so much.
Yeah, Footloose is probably the first movie of this season that I had seen before. I was subjected to it when I was in university.
All right.
By a lady friend. And yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I'll just,
right.
the premise, we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get spoilers. Just before we do get started, I'll remind you, if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch on YouTube if you do. And of course, at the end of the show, I'll tell you more about this, but we do some bonus shows that are monthly over on our Patreon, where you can go and support us and get extra content, but I'll tell you more about all that at the end. Yeah, the basic premise of Footloose is that it's a small town where dancing has been outlawed. It is illegal to dance. Along with, I think, booze and, drugs. Although, to be fair, I'm pretty sure all the other towns and states in the country are still outlawed that, by and large, but yeah not special to this town. But and Kevin Bacon is the lead character, or he plays the lead character of Ren, who moves to the town from the big city. He's from Chicago, and stirs things up because he doesn't get the rules and wants to dance, and everyone looks at him like he's the weirdo outsider, and that's the basic premise. But most notably, John Lithgow is in this movie. He plays the father of the love interest. He's the reverend who actually came up with some of these laws. He convinced everyone to follow these laws, and it's not peak Lithgow because he's not as funny. Like, good Lithgow is when he's being funny. Here he's he's the serious straight dad who's like, no, praise the Lord! The kids are doing things that will lead to the devil. Stop this right now. That's not as good as, full-on Lithgow.
Yeah, he's very brimstone and like, the Lord doesn't want us doing fun things. Everything has to be for him, and let's now praise his name.
Although, to be fair, actually, I also like menacing Lithgow when he's like a serial killer in like a Brian De Palma movie. That's also very good.
There were aspects of that in this, but for the most part, it was just concerned father Lithgow.
It was concerned father, conservative small towns stuff. That's what it's getting at. The other main big cast member to mention is the love interest herself, character of Ariel, played by Laurie Singer. She's the Reverend's daughter, and she, clearly is, wanting to act out. She wants to do things she's not supposed to. She's been a rebellious teenager, perhaps more so because of how strict her father is. But that's the basic setup. Also, Sarah Jessica Parker's in there as one of her friends. She's not a big character, but she's just there.
I was actually surprised that because she's essentially the main best friend out of like the group of four. She keeps on popping up over and over again. I was surprised that I was completely unaware that she was in this up until I saw her name in the opening credits.
I mean, I'd seen this before, and I didn't remember she was in it, so...
There you go.
So there's that. I remember Kevin Bacon and John Lithgow, because I know who they are. Everyone else. Although, Kevin Bacon's mum in this is also Lorraine McFly's mum from Back to the Future.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Did you not recognize it? We just did that recently.
I didn't. Yeah, no. Maybe it's the hairstyle, or maybe it's because we were in the '80s. I'm not sure, but yeah, I can see it now.
What you mean, like Back to the Future, which is also in the 80s?
No, but I mean, like, she's in '80s garb in this, where in that she was in '50s.
See,
like,
you say that, but there was a bit early on in this movie where I started thinking, wait, is this present day or is it like a period piece? Because half the teenagers look like they were wearing stuff in the 50s, and it's not. It's just 1984 or whatever year this came out in. But it felt like a period. I mean, I guess maybe that's because they're going for it's a conservative town with old school values, so half of them are dressing old school. But it made me question it for a minute. Anyway, that's the premise of the movie. David, what did you think of Footloose?
This movie is so stupid. Like, it's so dumb. But here's the thing. I kind of love it.
Oh.
Like, don't get me wrong. The plot is absolutely paper thin. The characters are like caricatures of exactly what you think they would be. Like, they go 200% further than any normal person would. And I think that my favorite bits of the movie, though, are when it goes full tilt, like dance montage, because that's when it is so absurdly over the top that it wraps back around to being just hyper enjoyable. Like, I was giggling to myself the entire time they had dance montages. Add on top of that, the soundtrack is an absolute banger from top to bottom. And I think that out of all the character plots, I'm super into John Lithgow's plot. Like, he, as much as he is the straight man, he actually has to wrestle with some very interesting ideas that, honest to God, 40 years out from this movie, most of them are still problems in, like, at least America. And that is really saying something.
Yeah, that's a weird one, because, like, I almost kind of respect that it's trying to do, like, almost like a stealth Fahrenheit 451 story where it just uses the dancing as the main thing that's been suppressed, and it's about trying to not go into a dystopia. But I don't know if that's just because, like, I'm fixating on that, because I'm like, I can see, like, almost a good size fiction movie that they're taking from versus you know, they're just being a dumb teen dance movie with tractor face-offs and other such things.
God, yeah.
It takes some weird, like, sort of bigger swings at points as well. There's, like, moments that are a bit more violent than you expect for the movie that it is, and I don't know. It is a very strange premise, although bizarrely it is actually based on, like, a real town where dancing was outlawed from, like, 1896 or something like that for a long time, and I mean, I guess it makes more sense from an older time period, I guess, but it's still, you know.
Yeah, I did do some minor research into it, and essentially there's a bunch of towns out in, especially like Midwest sort of stuff, that have these laws on the books, because the way that it worked out was that they wanted to, like, lawmakers wanted to penalize things like, you know, unregulated alcohol distribution and stuff like that. They wanted to be able to attack places for that stuff, but it was a lot harder to prove that. So instead what they did was they passed basically, like, anti-dance hall laws, because at the time that was a lot of places were doing, like, they were held up as dance halls, but they would be serving alcohol and such, and therefore it allowed it to be able to go after them a lot easier. The consequence of that being is that the way that these were written, because they were just trying to do something very broad to get anything to shut these guys down, it essentially outlawed dancing as, like, a general thing. It was saying, like, you know, no more than 2 or 3 people can dance in a location at any time, and that's how you ended up with stuff like this.
Yeah, whereas this, and that'd be a fine, I guess, if that's what the backstory of this movie was, but it's not. The backstory of this movie is that this law only got enacted in the last few years because there was an accident, which people then blamed on people drinking and dancing. So dancing is just now outlawed in this town. That's the premise.
Yeah, but, like, that's part of the charm for me, is that it's such an over-the-top reaction to such, like, an innocent thing that it really sells the idea of, like, this is borderline a cartoon in places. Like, this isn't something where you're supposed to actually believe that this is something that's going on out in like some random Midwest town. It's essentially the equivalent of in a fantasy story when there's some evil emperor who says like, oh, all of the women of the town must serve me or whatever like that. It's like cartoonishly evil, but you're not supposed to believe it's actually happening.
Sure. I don't know. It's not like a badly made movie per se. Like there's characters have got some level of charisma. It's paced relatively well. I don't think it overstays its welcome by much. Some of the cast are quite good. I think fundamentally there's just something about the premise where, like, as it ramps up and it's all about them trying to get the law overturned so they can have a dance, you know, basically a senior prom effectively is what the goal is by the time you get to the back half of the movie. It almost felt like the way it's being treated, I'm like, I wish the thing that we're talking about was something I could actually buy into and feel like I can root for. And while I respect that the dancing is just kind of a stand-in for a lot more serious things, subtextually, I fundamentally just could never get over the fact that this is all just arguing so they can have a dance, when I'm thinking, like, what? I mean, what? Like, I just don't care. The stakes just aren't that high. And also, I'm not convinced that if you just go and have the dance, that, like, what? All two cops in this town are going to show up and, like, stop you? Like, what?
It's in the conservative towns, it's not about the law, it's about being shamed.
Yes.
Everyone around will know that you broke the law. How dare you?
Oh, there's a lot of that in this movie, yeah, for sure. In fact, almost to an absurd degree, where like people, extended family members of Kevin Bacon's character are suffering consequences because he's suggested some slightly different ideas once or twice.
Yep, he's pushing the boundaries of what society conforms to, and we just can't have that.
I'll say this right now. I don't think anyone in school when I was there ever did a damn thing that made anyone's parents, other than their own parents, ever even think about, talk about, question it. No one cared about anyone else's kids. It just never came up. No one gave a shit.
I mean, you're right, and that's part of what I think. I'm saying, it feels like a cartoon. It doesn't feel like this is supposed to be a thing where I'm expected to believe this is the town next door is doing this. It feels like this is some sort of alternate bizarro world where it's, you know what it is? It's Pleasantville. Like, everyone shows up, no one can ever leave, and everyone just knows everybody all the time. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but no, I really do actually appreciate the censorship angle, though. I know you're saying that dancing stands in for the larger things that they're talking about. For the most part, they don't talk about it, but the John Lithgow plot specifically, as it progresses, they do specifically talk basically about the slippery slope thing of, oh, okay, we're banning dancing. What else can we ban? Like, what else can we crack down on in terms of protecting the children? And I swear to God, that could not be more relevant today than it was 40 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. But that's why that stuff is the more interesting part in the movie. Is the idea that this reverend character, who is the conservative one, actually starts to look at the people around him and go, no, they're going too far. They're starting to act like dictators, and is about what can be consumed by the children, and that's not like that. That's the most, like, honestly, make this a serious drama about John Lithgow's character going through an arc where he realizes he's went too far. That's an interesting movie to me. The teen romance, I think, is just like there. It's just kind of whatever. I feel very little kind of chemistry between the two leads, to be honest.
Yeah, if I had any major critiques, it would be they had a romance like set up for the female lead, and then she leaves her boyfriend for Kevin Bacon, but I couldn't tell you why. They have nothing. There's absolutely nothing there that feels like they have any sort of spark between them.
Yeah, I think that's weak, and I think just in general, looking at it from the kids' perspectives, feels that John Lithgow should be the main character. And I'm not just saying that because I like John Lithgow. I like Kevin Bacon well enough. There's nothing against Kevin Bacon. But it just feels like he's got the more interesting character because he's actually got he's got something that he's going through because of a trauma from recent memory. He's, maybe pushed very far in some ways, and this movie's he's the one with the arc. He's the one who learns things and changes. He's the one who goes through a story. The teens are basically just there to be like, this is who we are, and this is who we still are at the end of the film. We just wanted things.
Yeah, I feel like this is where this movie is the exact line of how do we make an interesting movie with like an arc for this character, and then how do we sell that to the teenage audience of the day? And unfortunately, it means that John Lithgow's character gets shunted off to second tier status, and Kevin Bacon comes up on top.
Well, I think that's the thing, though. It never started that way, though, right? This started development as we're making a teen dancing movie to appeal to teenagers, particularly girls, right? The whole idea is you got Kevin Bacon as the heartthrob, the daughter. Well, you made a face there. Did I say something stupid?
You said heartthrob.
Okay, all right, fine. I flubbed the word. Have a banana. All right.
Ha 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 ha. You silly man. All right, I'm good.
All right, good. Glad you got that out of your system. So yeah, they've got Kevin Bacon as the heartthrob, and all the girls, as soon as they see him at the start of the movie, like, oh, there's a new boy. Oh, isn't he hunky? Isn't he magical? My.
Isn't he like 24 and going to high school? What the hell is that?
To be fair, they're all like 24 going to high school.
Yeah, that's true.
At least in the context of this movie's universe, they all look that age.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
It's so funny though, because it brings up topics like, teenage sex and stuff like that, and it doesn't really focus on them in any great way, which in some way does feel almost a little progressive, but at the same time, the impact of it is, one, diminished a little bit because they're all like 24, so it doesn't really feel like anything really. But this idea of accepting, because another theme of the movie, of course, is this idea of accepting that your kids eventually are at an age where they have to make their own choices, they have to make their own mistakes, they have to be able to choose what they're doing. Because obviously he's a very controlling father figure. He isn't like his daughter's out late, or he's concerned about what she's doing, that kind of thing. And he sees her attitude and breaking the rules as like, oh, she's turning into a delinquent and we're losing her. And the wife's kind of there to be like, nah, she's actually acting a lot like you, to be honest. She's just as stubborn as you are, and all that's really happening this here is you're stopping the natural progression of growing up.
Right. Yeah, it's the idea that you can care for your kid, you can not control them, but you can like monitor the sort of things they get into. But at a certain point, they're gonna have to transition to adulthood. And it needs to be able to be a gradual process, not a sudden thing of like, well, you're 18, bye.
There's a fuzzy time period in a teenage life where obviously up until the age of like, I don't know, 12, like, yeah, you pretty much do control the kids. You kind of just have to make most of the decisions for them, but by and large. And then obviously you get to this point where no, they have to have freedom to actually start to think for themselves and make mature choices. But obviously at the same time, you don't want them doing bad things or like going down a path that leads to prison or death or whatever other bad things could happen with the wrong choices. Check out our colleague Connor for an example of such a person. But it's. That's like that's just like a parenting thing, I guess, more than anything else. But they're trying to use that in this movie, and they're trying to deal with this character that's going through that. And I think it's hitting at decent themes. I just fundamentally, much like a lot of these dancing movies, I don't really care about the surface level plot that much.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that. I'm not, like I said, the plot is paper thin. It is not something that has this like depth to it of, well, at least what it's presenting you directly. Obviously, if you look at the sub themes and stuff like that, but what it's presenting is paper thin. It's all about dance, and that's all they're talking about. There's at one point there's a part where they talk to the town council, and that is like the moment in the movie where it feels like you should have this like big thing where it's supposed to stretch out and show you like, no, here's what the dancing actually means, and like how we're going to spread this message to mean all of these other things that shouldn't be stopped for teenagers. But then they just don't, and they just keep it narrowly defined to dancing, and the movie continues on after that. And it's like, okay, I feel like that was your big moment you kind of whiffed on there. But between the moments where the plot is paper thin and like there's no chemistry to any of the actors, they're just so stupidly fun with it. We have Kevin Bacon's angry dance scene. We have the tractor chicken scene. We have teaching Willard to dance. All of these scenes, I just found myself so engrossed in because they were so stupid fun. They didn't pretend to take themselves seriously. It was just a good time.
The tractor scene was kind of fun. I'm not really with you on the other two, if I'm honest.
That's fair. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not really feeling it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's just, there's just some things where I can even get behind, because, you know, there's movies I like about subjects that I don't care about. You know, like, I enjoy many sports movies, even though I don't care about any sports, but they're just told in a way where it works. You understand why the characters care about it. And I think maybe one of the things that this movie maybe could have used was a clearer defined goal earlier. Obviously, eventually you get to the point where it's like, okay, let's try and get this dance. But that's relatively late into the movie before that's a concern. If anything, it's definitely mid-act 2, if not even late act 2, before that becomes an idea that is then something they're shooting for. So there's definitely a lot of the movie which is really just kids move to a new town and he's getting to know people and he's clashing with certain ideas and things. But there's definitely a period where all it really is about how there's pushback about some of the things that he's coming up against with him and his family and the people around him. And for that part of the movie, it does feel like there's not a lot of momentum going forward with its plot, is maybe my bigger thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree. I also think that in terms of Kevin Bacon as a character, I think that they probably should have started him off very clearly disliked by the vast majority of students. And then he slowly wins them over the course of the movie, because as the movie progresses, it feels like everyone kind of likes him except for this very small group. And by the end of the movie, it's the exact same. It's everyone likes him except for this very small group. So it doesn't feel like he actually had to overcome any adversity in school and like try to be friends with anyone. It just felt like he was more so trying to win over the Reverend character more than anything else, which is more disappointing because they interact like twice in the whole movie.
It's there's something weird about the dynamic actually, where like the love interest Ariel, who's obviously another major character who gets a lot of screen time, she is into Kevin Bacon and kind of pursues him instead of the other way around. And Kevin Bacon at a certain point is just kind of for it, because he's a teen boy and pretty girl is interested, so he is like, yeah, sure. But that's not obviously that compelling as a story. But the actual conflict is with her father, but it's not because the father disapproves of him dating the daughter. I mean, he does disapprove, but that's not what the conflict is. The conflict is all the rules that he set up in town. And he ends up becoming this kind of poster figure for what Ren, Bacon's character, is fighting against throughout. But I guess, in a weird way, like, I almost would have preferred if it even went more hokey with it and it really felt like a hero and a villain. But I don't know if it ever quite does feel like that. Yeah,
I get what you're saying there. I think that they wanted, by the end of the movie, I mean, I don't think it's that much of spoilers, but they wanted by the end of the movie for the Reverend to not be a completely hated character. They wanted there to be sympathetic qualities to him. So, yeah, I think that that's them almost pulling their punches a little bit to make it so they could have that ending. But if they did go full tilt villain.
But you say that, though, I think it would be more effective if he does have a...
that's what I'm saying.
If he has a turn after he's been more of a villain, it'll mean more if you can convince me that he's really changed and learned something because of what he's went through, or because he's been convinced of something, then great. That'll have more impact, as opposed to feeling a bit more, like,
yeah. Well, the way they set him up already, because we already said they have this idea where he's pushing all of this like no dancing, none of that stuff. And it's other townspeople who are taking that further. So already with how the movie's set up, he's the middleman. He's the one who is not all the way to the far right or the far left. He's like slightly on the right. And he has to come back a little bit because of the people he sees on the far right
I mean,
side.
hell, that's almost another interesting thing they could have played with. There's a moment where he talks about how the daughter says, "Oh, hey, I've watched you give these sermons for years, and I'm realizing now, the more I see it, that it's all kind of showmanship. It's all kind of smoke and mirrors to like get the point across." And he talks about how, yeah, I mean, that's how I reach people. That's how I like get to the emotion and like get the point of what I'm saying across. And it almost feels like in a weird way, he's done that too well, where he's like turned people into almost zealots and almost like, you know, these hardcore conservatives. And it feels like there's almost more of an interesting examination there that you could have about the influence and what he realizes he's done to the people around him by, you know, going too hard on how he prophesies these certain things and whatnot. So that, again, that's an interesting theme. There's something interesting that you could do with that. I wish the movie kind of clearly picked one or two of these things that it really wanted to focus on and really went with it. Admittedly, most of these themes that I'm bringing up don't necessarily lend themselves specifically to a fun teenage movie about dancing,
right,
which is going against what the initial concept of the movie probably wanted to be in the first place. But
it's kind of like the equivalent of there being like a really good story about like classism or like economic downfalls or something like that, buried in like an animated kids movie about a couple of wolves or something. It's like, why did you take these great concepts and bury them in such a bad like setting, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's the same sort of thing here. There's a great examination of the Reagan years, of like what it was like to live in this borderline, like coming up on like a Christian theocracy in the Reagan years, where the parents just see Satan in all the music and all the dancing and everything like that, and what it means to not like try to get anything new, but just fight back against that to keep the status quo as it was before. There's something great about that. But like you said, the fact that it then has to cater down to, okay, but it's a teen dancing movie, they kind of have to neuter their themes a little bit the whole way through.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's value in putting some serious themes and messaging in material that is aimed at teens or children or whoever. Obviously, you want to get those ideas across to young groups, but there's... But I feel like this movie is on that edge of like actually looking at very hard-hitting subjects and doing them in ways that feel kind of hard-hitting. Like it almost pushes the boundaries a little bit at various points in the movie, only to feel like it doesn't really commit itself to really following through with like those themes that it's touching upon. You know, simple things like the daughter character being a bit more open about sex and stuff like that with her father, or some of the violence that happens, or there's some of these little things that feel like, oh, it's almost trying to be a serious movie about these very serious things. And it just never quite... And obviously, I realize that a lot of people who like this movie aren't looking for that. They don't want that. They like that it's a movie about, you know, these free spirits turning things around and hopefully getting dancing put back on the menu by the end. That's what people want from it. And they like the music, they like the soundtrack, they like the actors.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what they like. And I get all that. But it's not something that I felt myself being fully compelled in. And, you know, I'm probably never going to look at this again. I don't feel the need to ever rewatch this. It's, you know, it is what it is. It exists. It's fine. But it's definitely, you know, it focuses on all the things that I think make it less interesting, and all the things that are kind of there that could be developed into a far more interesting story are, you know, are they're treated more as just the reasons for these things happening in the movie, as opposed to being the fundamental point of the movie. And
yeah,
that's,
I get that.
Yeah, so
I think when I was watching it, I kind of had two separate like mind states that I was switching between, and it essentially boiled down to, is John Lithgow on screen? Like
Yeah.
if he was, I was into, I was giving it attention. I was like, we are going to deal with some like character drama, some actual pathos here. And then the moment he disappears and Kevin Bacon pops up, I'm just like, all right, let's cut Footloose. Let's just have some fun, dance here.
There's no greater like example of that than the start of the movie, because the start of the movie, the opening title sequence is just close up of all these feet dancing as the main song plays, you know, the Footloose song, right? And it's, you know, 2-3 minutes of that solid, and then the actual first scene of the movie is John Lithgow giving a sermon in the church, and like it brings the tone crashing down. It's like, no, you're here for a fun movie, but here we're going to talk about the serious things, and we're going to, and I think, yeah, that goes throughout the movie where you'll have something where it feels like, oh, John Lithgow's character is actually really interesting and they're doing something with him. And then you'll have, oh, it's like, you know, Kevin Bacon's dancing in that abandoned factory and swinging on chains and shit like he's Spider-Man.
I do wonder if that was almost intentional, though, because there's the one scene very close to the beginning where the preacher's daughter pulls out a boombox, starts playing whatever song is on, and then everyone's kind of like tapping their feet. They're like shuffling a little bit. They're not fully dancing, but you can feel it's just bubbling out of them. And then John Lithgow's character shows up and everything just shuts down immediately. The entire mood just goes dead. And I feel like from a pacing issue of the movie, that's kind of what's happening. Like they keep on getting the audience like, yeah, all right, we're feeling good. We're feeling good. John Lithgow, everyone stop. You're not allowed to have that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I almost felt the inverse of that, though, where I was like, oh, John Lithgow's on the screen, great, I'm interested, things are happening. Oh, no, we're back to just teen shit.
Yeah. Before we go into spoilers, I do just want to call out, like, how fantastic this soundtrack is. We were talking on Flashdance that one had, like, 2-3 good songs that, like, really did well for it. This one's got, like, 7. This one's got Footloose, Let's Hear It for the Boy, Holding Out for a Hero in the best use since Shrek 2, Hurt So Good, Somebody's Eyes, I'm Free. All of these fantastic songs that I've heard plenty outside of this movie, so the fact that most of them came from this movie is gobsmacking me.
Yeah, I didn't recognize any of them except Holding Out for a Hero.
Not even Footloose.
Well,
I feel like Footloose.
Well,
yeah.
I only because I've seen the movie before. Like I didn't know Footloose outside of that. I think Flashdance's soundtrack was better if I'm comparing them.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, if you haven't heard any of the songs, yeah, I'd agree, because a lot of the stuff I just kind of grew up with.
Nah, I didn't recognize any of it. Holding Out for a Hero, is that from this movie? Is this like...
Okay, yes, it is. It is made for the soundtrack for this movie, but I swear to God, I remember hearing it as from, like, I think the movie Fame, I thought it originally came from, but I can't find any record of that now, so I don't know what in the hell I was thinking of.
Yeah, you may just be losing your mind. That's fine.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. I mean, I know it from various things. Like, you mentioned Shrek 2, but the first thing I think of when I think of that song is the pilot for Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, because there's a montage in there where they're making his outfit, and that's the song that's playing. Yeah. I also think the movie's called Who's Harry Crumb? It's a John Candy movie, and there's a whole big bit towards the end where he's on like the airport stairs, and they're like chasing after the plane, and Holding Out for Heroes playing. So it's one of those songs that's been used like over and over in different movies, TV, what have you, for such a long time. So when it started playing in this, I didn't think to myself, oh, it came from this. I just assumed, oh no, it already existed and this is using it like everything else has. But
yeah. But no, it was made. I mean, that's kind of what makes it work so much more for me, is the fact that it was made for this movie and it's used in possibly the silliest, like, out of all the examples you've said, this is the silliest possible usage of it. And I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. I didn't really feel much for the soundtrack, honestly.
All right. That's fair. I was really digging it to the point where I'm probably going to find a playlist with all those songs on them and just pop it into my library.
Yeah. So some of the songs sounded just a little, almost country sounding. Like they're sort of rocky, poppy, but just on the brink of country, and I'm not into that.
You're definitely thinking of Hurt So Good
Okay, that's fair.
Like that's definitely the track. Because yeah, it is on that borderline. But I don't know. Maybe it's just because I know it longer and I know it as an '80s hit rather than a country hit that it works for me.
Even Footloose sounds kind of like.
Well, yeah, but that's because it's Kenny Loggins, and Kenny Loggins has just that feel to him of with Danger Zone and all that, where it's like borderline country just because of the way he sounds.
Like, I guess Footloose is maybe less country, but it sounds like something that I'd see people line dancing to.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, in the movie, you do see people line dancing to it.
Yeah,
to
but
an extent,
I don't
so.
think people are going to line dance to Danger Zone, though.
No, that's true.
I mean, I'd like to see them try, I suppose, but I don't expect it. All right, spoilers then, so we can talk through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, so we already kind of mentioned the opening. You know, it's the opening titles, then it's the sermon. But throughout the sermon, you know, I was relating to some of the characters in the audience, particularly the kid who was asleep during the sermon. I found myself relating to him. He's he's clearly the real
That kid was not asleep. That kid was comatose. Like there's a point where the father like shakes him and he's like, "What?"
But you know, this is where they're all turning around. Like Kevin Bacon's apparently just arrived in town that morning, so this is the first anyone's seen of him. And everyone's introducing him. And one of the first sort of awkward moments that happens is this. So the ultra conservative guy in town, who will come back up later in Lithgow's plot, but he comes up to Lithgow whilst they're sort of chatting casually on like the porch with Kevin Bacon and his mum, and he's like, "Hey, that English teacher, he's going to teach that book." And I actually didn't hear what book it was. It wasn't until Kevin Bacon said, "Oh, hey, I like that book," and they all turn and look at him. He's like, "Yeah,
Yeah, Slaughterhouse 5.
Slaughterhouse 5. It's a classic." And like, he's like, "No, was it John Waters?" He said was a classic.
Well, no, it was Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer.
That was to my cut. But yeah, no,
I didn't watch an alternate cut. I just didn't remember what the name was.
Well, Tom Sawyer is one of those American things. I don't know if that is something that would be changed in a international thing. But no, the line that got me about it though was the wife of the conservative guy is like, "Oh well, you know, it's not a classic in this town," and then he butts back with like, "It's a classic everywhere." Like, what are you talking about, you crazy lady?
And that sets up obviously that side of it. That okay, so this town not only because he doesn't know about the dancing yet, that comes up in a little bit, but this town like wants to ban certain books. They don't want certain books to be taught, and obviously that's a subject that is still being discussed. Certain states not wanting to have certain material in classrooms because there's a queer character in this, or there's something in there, or whatever.
Yep. So as soon as he started talking about the book thing, I'm like, oh, we're gonna have words, movie. We're gonna see how relevant you're gonna stay 40 years later.
So, basically, yeah, we get this sense that Kevin Bacon and his mom have moved here with her brother, his uncle, because Kevin Bacon's dad has left them, and this is maybe where they had to go. They couldn't afford to go and live somewhere on their own, so they're moving in with family.
Yeah,
that's why they're here.
I mean, honestly, all of the backstory as to why they're here is just kind of implied, and I would say most of the family stuff is also just left. Like, you see a couple interactions, but for the most part, it's all left very up in the air and implied as to what actually happened to get them here.
It's I mean, it's like, you know, he left. Like, Bacon does talk about him thinking it was his fault that dad was thinking of leaving, and then one day he did. And you get enough interactions with the uncle, where the uncle is, you know, he's conservative. He's saying, "Oh, you're like, I'm hearing things about you, and you're causing ripples in town, and I'm hearing things. Maybe you should learn to behave or learn to keep your mouth shut." To be honest, one of the more interesting elements of Kevin Bacon's whole character is that his mum, well, not that outspoken necessarily, does always seem to kind of have his back, or at least doesn't. Yeah. Like, she never seems like she never turns around and says, "Yeah, you know what, maybe you should try and fit in so you don't make my life difficult." Later on in the movie, we find out that she's actually lost her job. She's been fired because Kevin Bacon was caught talking about music or something. I don't know what the exact thing was.
The rest of town has heard that he's going in front of town council, and so everyone's like, "Hey, maybe you should be like mothering your kid instead of working." And she says, "Well, why don't you go screw yourself?" And that's why she got fired.
Yeah, so like, it always feels like she's not. I mean, she could probably, defend him a bit more with some people, but it never feels like she gives into this pressure and like tells him to like, no, act like everyone expects you to act, kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels to me like she's got the same sort of mindset, like coming from a big city. She understands the importance of like kids being able to be themselves and do what they're going to do otherwise. And I think that the whole reason she's not standing up for him is that she realizes this is something that he's got to do. Like this is one of those coming of age stories for him. She can't just come in and say like, yeah, listen to my son. I'm an adult now, so you need to listen to me too.
But that's not even what I'm getting. I'm just getting that she's more endearing to the audience because she at least seems to have like this attitude where we can sort of get behind her. Like she doesn't seem like an asshole like most of the adults in this town, by and large, seem to be. There's obviously the one guy that hires him at the mill who ends up being helpful as the movie goes on because he suggests this old warehouse later for their party,
Right.
and he seems to be like an ally to them. But by and large, a lot of the adults are very much against him, very much against the dancing, very much against everything else. The other thing that happens early on, and this takes up like 5 minutes of screen time, and it's like, this is one of the things where I'm like, okay, what is this movie? And I get that it's doing the thing where Ariel, Lithgow's daughter, is acting out, and she's like doing things that are more crazy and rebellious and dangerous because her father is so conservative. It's kind of this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like try to suppress the kids is making them act out in even more dangerous ways. Like she can't dance, so she's going to do the Van Damme splits between two vehicles instead. But yeah, like so, what turns out to be her boyfriend, like Chuck was his name, drives up next to her and her friends, and they're in her friend's car, and they're shouting things over backwards and forwards, joking about racing, whatever. And then she decides to start climbing out the window, and she's got her hands on his truck. And then eventually she's up, and she's, like I say, she's got like 1 foot in one vehicle, 1 foot in the other, and she's doing the whole splits thing almost. Not quite, it's not actually the splits, but you know what I mean. But eventually, of course, they're taking up 2 lanes of the road, and eventually this truck, this big semi-truck, is coming down and is like honking its horn because you stupid kids, get out of the way. And she just narrowly like gets in the truck at the last second, and the truck swerves off the road to like, not split her in half, which is what would have happened. But this takes several minutes, and all I could think was, okay, what is this movie now? I don't like this is like very, very Daredevil. What's happening with her right now?
I think it works for the character when we get more about her, but just having this be the opening thing that we really even know about her to begin with, it's completely insane. It's just like, what could possibly be going on in this town that this is viewed as something that is not immediately grounds for like, I'm just not going to hang out with you anymore because you're clearly trying to commit suicide.
I think this is kind of one of the things that felt, because I get the argument that you want to start big. You want to start with the big character introduction, and this tells you something about her. But it almost felt weird to have this before the scene you already brought up, where she's at like the diner, and like all the kids are all parked, and they're listening to the boombox, and she's kind of shuffling a bit, and people are tapping their feet. And then John Lithgow shows up, and everything drops, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Dad." And he's like, "Your mother thought you might not have money," and it's really awkward, and then he just leaves, and it's like he caught her doing something bad, but he doesn't want to talk about it. Almost like a parent who's really homophobic catches their kid doing something gay and just doesn't want to talk about it afterwards. That's kind of the vibe that it gives you, and I almost feel like that's a good character introduction for her. It tells you her life with her father. It gives you that vibe, but there is this weird thing that because we've already seen her, like it would have almost made more sense to me to show her do the crazy thing the next day after this interaction, because it would have been like a knock-on effect. It's like, okay, this is how suppressed she is, so then we see it escalate to her acting out in even more extreme ways, because he can't argue this is dancing, because it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that she continues to act out, like, pretty much every time that we see her interact with her father, it's almost immediately followed by her acting out in some way. I think after this scene, it's her just finished having sex with her boyfriend is what we see next time. But I do think that opening with, because if we're going to keep going back and forth, opening with her doing a Daredevil thing makes it a bit more confusing as to like who this character is, because then you have to wait to understand her character moving forward. If we opened with the father interaction, then yeah, you're right. It probably would have made more sense to say, oh, it's a rubber band thing. She's being stretched by her dad in one direction that she just wants to snap back in the other way.
If anything, I'd have moved the car thing to like halfway through the movie. Because the thing with the boyfriend is more subtle, because it's more like, okay, they've just had sex in the woods on like a blanket or whatever, and she's getting dressed, and she's saying how, oh, my dad hates these boots, and she's talking about like, he basically cracks a joke about how that's why you like them so much, because you like rebelling against your father.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing that scene also brings up is that she's applied to colleges. She's ready to leave. She doesn't want to stay in this town. She sees bigger things for herself, which does set up maybe partially why she's attracted to Kevin Bacon. She sort of looks at him as an outsider, as someone who's come in. He's like a big city boy kind of thing. And it sets up that he's like, why do you want to leave? What, you are a small town girl. And he's kind of, he's like him clinging on to her. So it sets up that character dynamic well enough. But it does sort of set up, again, she wants to get out of her current situation. So again, like I could have seen it escalating and escalating until she did this truck thing halfway through, or even like late act 2, even like somewhere where it's like a breaking point almost. Like that like this truck thing, her almost getting hurt. Let's say people actually found out about it because like it was close. Like maybe someone witnessed it, right, and told her dad. I could see this being the incident that really put a rift between the relationship in the end of Act 2. That then would be mended by the time she comes to see him and has that heart-to-heart in the church where they talk about who he is and, why they're so different and so on. Like, I could see that being way later in the movie, but it's like the first thing you see will do.
Yeah, I mean, that's implying that he would ever find out about it, because there is another thing later on in the movie when she's like pretty much trying to make Ren into her boyfriend at that point, and they go to a train yard, and she says how like, oh yeah, we got this game where we just stand in front of the train and scream at it as it comes at us. And again, seems wildly and ridiculously dangerous, but it doesn't end up doing anything. Like, nobody really cares that happened, the same way that nobody really cares that the truck thing happened either.
Again, though, that makes more sense to me before the truck thing. If you put the truck thing after this shows you that she does things that are reckless, that are dangerous. Like they play this game where they stand in front of the train and scream and then move out at the last possible second. That shows you she's got that type of like behavior. And then the truck thing would be like and the fact that her brother died in a car accident would also then like hit more of a dramatic point, perhaps. Like I can see how you just rearrange that a little bit, and all of a sudden there's like a progression to everything she does in the movie. I'm not saying you'd keep everything every detail the exact same. But I can see how that truck thing makes a lot more sense later on in the movie. But
yeah, I mean, I agree that for an audience standpoint, it would make more sense to see it progress there. But I think having it the way it does kind of instills in the audience that, like, before the movie began, she already had this progression. She already has escalated to where this is the point where she's at. She's already putting herself into these hyper dangerous situations just to be able to fight back against how oppressed she feels. I think that it sets up a different type of character, and it's not that much different from what we get by the end of the movie, but it sets up this slightly different one where it makes it feel much more long running. It makes it feel like this is something that's been going on for ages,
Yeah, I kind of get that. I feel like you can split the difference though and kind of have both. I think this is a case of you can have your cake and you can eat it too. You can set up the feeling that this has been going on for a long time, but also make it feel like it's progressing in the movie for the audience in a way. I don't know. It felt like it came on a bit strong with that stuff. And then obviously all the early stuff with Bacon. He makes a friend at school. With
I have never seen a more like aggravated intro to a friendship than this movie gave those two, where they bump into each other and the other guy's name is Willard. He's wearing like a cowboy hat. They just start like getting super pissed at each other. And the moment Kevin manages to stand up for himself, it's just like, he says that opening line. He's like, oh, nice hat. What, they sell men's clothes where you bought that? Willard is immediately just like, all right, you're cool. I'll see you at lunch. And he just leaves.
And then at lunch, they're sitting together, they're talking, they're getting to know each other, talking about life in Chicago, and like eventually here, like, Kevin Bacon's like talking about dancing and stuff, and eventually they sort of like bring up, oh yeah, you can't do that here. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, dancing, it's illegal. What do you mean dancing's illegal? And like, no, seriously, it's illegal. You can't do it here. So obviously it feeds into this idea that Kevin Bacon keeps coming up against things that make him feel like he hates this town. Like, what is this town? Like, Like I've lost everything else I know, and now I can't even dance if I want to.
Well, you can dance if you want to.
You can leave your friends behind. Yes,
there you go. I was waiting for it. But no, the one thing that got me in this was such a tiny little point that honestly I'm not sure why it was in the movie. Was he wears a like dress shirt with a very loosened tie. That's his first day of school garb that he's going for. And his mom calls him out on just like, how about you don't wear the tie? And he's like, I want to wear a tie. You know, that's what I want to do. And she's like, all right, fine. If you want to wear a tie, wear a tie. But everyone in school calls him out saying like, only pansies wear ties. And I'm like, did I miss an 80s trend? What was this? When were ties weird to wear?
It's probably weird for a teenager to wear a tie when they don't need to. I mean, you know, going to school in the UK, we wore a tie every day because it was part of the uniform. It was just kind of, you had to. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it is kind of weird because, like, it felt like it was going to be, okay, if that's going to be his thing where he's wearing a tie the whole movie, that's cool. But he actually doesn't. Like, after this first day, he kind of just, I don't know, stops and gives in.
Disappears, whatever.
Yeah, and that's it. He's just, he's assimilating to the town. That maybe that's the one sign that he's making an effort. He's trying to fit in.
Yeah. I mean, that's later on, we do get a whole point where he's trying to make an effort to like join sports teams and stuff like that. But because he's fighting back against the town and everyone talks, nobody wants him around. And he feels that level of like ostracization where he's just like, I'm doing my best to fit in around here, but like everyone here sucks so much.
Yeah. He says most teams, specifically it's the athletics team. And I'm only bringing that up because there's just one random scene where he's training and he's doing like insane flips off the pole and all that.
He was a gymnast back in Chicago. What about it?
Which is fine. It's just they never mentioned it, and then it just cuts to a scene where he's talking to Willard. Willard's just standing at the side talking to him, and Bacon's doing spins and flips and twirls off the pole.
Yeah, that did seem a little bit weird that they set that up there rather than just even during the lunch conversation. They could have been like, "Oh yeah, what do you do back in Chicago?" He's like, "I don't know, I do some gymnast stuff and dancing." Like he could just say it there. Like it would have been just as fine.
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere where he's just all of a sudden he's doing all these, which explains why he's got a lot of dance moves, I guess, if he can move like this. But
oh yeah, that's why he Spider-Mans in empty warehouses.
He does, yeah. He gets frustrated. It's when his uncle basically tells him to fit in and that he's being a problem. That he gets mad, leaves the house, and drives out to the warehouse and has his angry dance. And somehow Ariel, who's been keeping tabs on him, followed him here somehow. Like she just knew, or maybe she was hanging out here because she likes to hang out here. Who knows? But she's there, and this is where she's like, "Oh, why aren't you interested in me? Why don't you look at me? Blah blah blah. Why don't you talk to me?"
He basically says the equivalent of just like, "You've got a boyfriend who's kind of like a total ass, and also I think you sleep around a lot, so I'm just gonna hold off on that."
Yeah, well, that's kind of inspired because Willard says that to him, that, oh, I think she's kissed a lot of guys, which they never actually go into if she has or she hasn't. For all we know, this boyfriend is really the only serious boyfriend she's had. We don't actually know, but...
I mean, it fits in with the sort of reputation she's trying to build of being this, like, you know, hell on wheels kind of character to conflict with her dad.
Yeah. Although we have skipped over the tractor thing because that was earlier on. The track so basically because him and Chuck exchange lines briefly on the outside of school where they fire some insults back and forth. He insults him for the tie, and then he fires back with basically calling him an asshole. And that's like, oh, he's just put down a challenge then. All right, I'll meet you on the farm at like 3:00 tomorrow, kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is the point. He already has like a job at this point. He's a flower warehouse like stacker is the best way I could say it. Yeah,
and his boss even says, hey, all the others are going to look at you a bit different for a while because they'll see you as an outsider. But then he hires him anyway, which is kind of a sign that he's going to be decent throughout the movie.
Yeah, he's a chill dude.
But yeah, basically they're going to play chicken with a pair of tractors where they're going to ride tractors towards each other as Holding Out for a Hero plays.
The moment Holding Out for a Hero started, and it was with these slow-ass tractors, like, just making their way on this dirt road. And the movie plays it up. Like, they do very far-back shots that show just how slowly these tractors are going. and then like it cuts back in on a close up as like the drum riff hits and Bonnie Tyler. It's so funny.
Yeah.
It is possibly the funniest scene in the movie.
What's interesting is that all of Ariel's friends are kind of siding with Bacon. Like she's still being the girlfriend to Chuck, right? I mean, she's been pleasant enough to. She's not like being an asshole to Bacon or anything, but she's still having to sort of side with him because it's her boyfriend. And the like Sarah Jessica Parker and the others are like kind of with him and saying, "Hey, like you can be him. Don't like he's a shithead. Just do it."
I'm pretty sure some of them are literally yelling out like, "Kill him! Do it! Kick his ass!"
So, because there's another guy that's kind of his friend who barely gets named, to be honest. He's like a taller guy who's got.
Yeah, you said barely gets named. Do you know his name? Because I don't.
Oh no. He's got like a. I'm going to guess Woody just based on a name in the IMDb list here, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that's Woody, but I'm just going to guess it is.
Fair.
But he like stands up for him later on in the movie a little bit when the bullies are trying to get to him. But I guess my favorite thing about the chicken tractor thing, is that Kevin Bacon was going to be the chicken. He was going to get away and jump off the tractor, but his shoelace gets caught on like the pedal or whatever. So he tries to get up and he can't. So he only stays on because he couldn't leave, and then that eventually forces Chuck the bully to jump off the tractor into the little pond that's next to the little road they're on. So Bacon won, but he won because fate intervened. So
I mean, I know this scene is basically supposed to set up the eternal rivalry between him and Chuck, where they're never going to be cool with each other after this point. But honest to God, I'm not sure what else this scene does besides just be a comedy beat. Because it seems like everybody, like you said, a bunch of the people are already on Ren's side. They're already cheering him on. So it seems like they don't need any more convincing to do that. They're just like, yeah, all right, cool.
Ariel's friends are all pretty much of the opinion you should dump Chuck, and you clearly like Kevin Bacon, so try to be with Kevin Bacon instead. That seems to be their attitude from the second they all meet him. So it's not like he's winning them over and like inspiring like a following and making friends. He's just kind of, I don't know.
I mean, it's at this point in the movie, he's accepted as like a friend. He's accepted as someone who they can hang out with. They think he's cool. But the movie then is about setting up. I mean, it does take probably another 30, 40 minutes until we get an act 2. But I think that it's then from that point setting up, oh no, he's trying to really change things. He's trying to upset the system and make this like different for us. Yeah.
And notably, outside of the opening title scene where all the feet are dancing, you don't actually get any dancing until the angry dance in the empty warehouse or the train yard or whatever it is. That's kind of the first time there's actually dancing in the movie. So, yeah, I mean, from
there's only one other scene that I want to bring up because I was confused by it. Maybe you can help me here. They have a sequence where Ren is approached by a fellow schoolmate, and the schoolmate offers him some weed, and Ren turns it down. And then I think it's a teacher comes in and is about to like, I don't know, bust them or something.
So I think this was like a friend of Chuck's trying to like get him into trouble, and that's why he was like sort of putting it in his pocket and saying it was free. And you know, Ren's like, no, I don't want it. But obviously this teacher walks out, so Ren has to run to the toilet and flush it so that there's no evidence. But I think it was about framing him to get him in trouble, to get him like kicked out or like whatever.
Yeah, but like the reason I'm confused is that it seems like when he flushed it, the teacher was pretty much like on the side of the other kid. It seems like he wanted to frame Ren just as much, you know?
I don't think the teacher wanted to frame him per se. I think the teacher's just one of the adults of the opinion that he's a troublemaker and they also want rid of him. So I think he thought he was guilty, but now it's just, there's no evidence now, so maybe I can't do anything about it. I think it's just, again, to show that everyone, but again, it's not everyone really. I mean, students-wise, it's only that one small group that are loyal to Chuck. Everyone else of the students seems to like him. It's just all the adults who don't like him because they think he's a bad influence because he's teaching their children to dance.
I have so many words for by the time we hit that last prop scene, but I'll save them for there.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, the next sort of big thing I remember, really, is that Bacon says to Willard and Ariel, right, and obviously
Rusty.
Rusty. Yeah, that's Sarah Jessica Parker's character. But Rusty does not sound like a girl's name, which is why it never sticks in my head. But he basically says, hey, let's go to a different state, let's drive out of town, and I'll show you what you've been missing. And he takes him to like a dancing bar in the city somewhere. And this is basically, for some reason, the main theme plays here as well. They dance to Footloose, and I'm like, this is weird you're doing it in the middle.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they don't use it at the end as well, because they do.
Yeah, they use it at the beginning, and I'm like, all right, that makes sense. It's a title song. And I knew they use it at the end, so I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It, at that point, becomes diegetic, and it's in the scene. The fact that it shows up randomly here in the middle as well, I'm like, okay, you might be overplaying your hand with this song, guys. Especially because it's not the full song. They just use it as part of a montage. So they should have used literally any other song at that point.
Yeah, you're just overusing it a little bit. But what we learn throughout all this, though, other than them just having fun and dancing for the first time, is that Willard can't dance. He doesn't know how to, which I guess makes sense in a town where no one's been allowed to dance for like 5 years.
Yeah.
So he refuses to go up and dance with Sarah Jessica Parker, and then some random guy starts dancing with her. He gets upset and tries to intervene, and the guy punches him, and that's the
It's implied that Willard is very much a hothead and always gets into fights, and so Sarah Jessica Parker specifically tell him like, no fights, no throwing punches, and yet he continuously gets punched himself, even though he's just like, he's being antagonistic, but he's not throwing fists himself. He's just taking them.
He's it's basically all just to pay off something towards the end, to be honest, which we'll get to when we get there. The big thing as well when they're driving back is that we find out what caused this ban on dancing. Ariel opens up and talks about her brother. Her older brother was in this like drunk driving incident like 5 years ago, and that led to all the rules being put in place. So it's like the movie gets like serious and somber for like a minute as she's like telling this story.
Yeah.
And then she goes home, and the next day John Lithgow's like, where were you for 6 hours last night? I'm feeling very concerned about your behavior recently, young lady.
And she fully snaps back on him. She's just like, oh, you don't give a crap about me when I'm actually here. It's only as soon as I walk out the door you actually care what I'm doing. And he basically is like, oh, that's not the case at all. I 100% care about you all the time. She's like, well, you sure as hell don't show it. And the mother starts to like speak up and defend her a little bit, to which point the Reverend shuts her down, just be like, no, let her speak for herself. It's about time she does. And then she says, well, a fat lot of good it'll do me. You probably won't listen to me any more than you listen to her. And then the Reverend smacks her, which completely, in my mind, changes like the whole tone of this relationship.
It does.
Here.
It feels quite a big moment, especially since the next time we see the Reverend, he's in church, and the wife is there, and he looks genuinely shocked that he's done this, and he's like, I've never hit anyone in my life. And the point of it is that obviously he's crossed the line. He knows he's crossed the line, and he's questioning why this current situation, this current status quo, has gotten to this point where he's this riled up that he's done something as unforgivable as this. So they do play it in a way where the weight of what he's just done, like, this isn't like a reveal that he's like this all the time. This is like the way they play this in the next couple of scenes is like, oh, I've just done this horrific thing. I need to question, like, why am I acting like this? What's causing me? Like, it's almost that sunk cost fallacy where he's in too deep with all the things he's enforcing that now it's like he's being challenged. It's almost like he's angry because she made such a good point that he doesn't listen to his wife, that he isn't listening to others around him, that hit a nerve, and that's what made him lash out. And that's kind of part of the soul searching that he has to do as a character. That said, though, I was surprised. If you told me that that's not as much violence as she's going to receive in this movie, because it gets worse for her later on with someone else, but yeah.
But no, in this church scene, I like how the mother character is portrayed here. She's very silent, she's very stoic, and she basically manages to perfectly straddle the line of like, I love my husband, I am going to support him no matter what, but I don't have to approve of everything he does, and I'm not going to stay quiet if that is the case. I'm going to tell him if he like is headed down the wrong path. And she does so. She straight up tells him, like, hey, you do great up in front of a crowd and getting them all riled up and getting them to listen to you, but you suck at the interpersonal stuff of like the one-on-one with your family. You need to work on that.
Yeah, and I think it may have even already happened by this point, where there's a scene where the conservative dad guy shows up and he's like, hey, like, this book's in the student library, we should, get rid of this book. And he's like, what book is it? And it's during this scene, you see Lithgow go into, he's going to do like he's doing like a talk for kids. He's going to do some sort of thing for like the kindergarten class or whatever.
Yeah. So
he's like sort of lifting up kids as he's talking to this guy. And he basically, this is the scene where it gets really interesting for me, because he's clearly thinking this guy's going too far. And he's like, hey, maybe let's not like start banning books like specifically. Because I think it makes you look back in that first scene with this guy a bit different, because I think at the time, I think the audience and I assumed that he was probably in agreement with this other guy, just because he's coming to him with this concern about this teacher teaching this book. And because of the way he reacts when Kevin Bacon speaks up, you think, oh, he's on this guy's side. But this scene kind of shows, oh no, he's not comfortable with banning reading material entirely. He's not, So obviously later on, when he gets a call and says, hey, that conservative guy's burning books down at the library, like, he's the one running down and like grabbing the books out of his hand and saying, no, this is fascist. Yeah. This is not what we do. We don't start burning books.
I love this subplot so much. And it's exactly what you're saying there, is because obviously, because of his son dying, because of the dancing and liquor and stuff, that's his own personal tragedy that made him want to go and set these laws in place. He pushed his down to have these laws put into place because of that tragedy. But in order to like justify it, in order to make it something that he was able to sell as a general good rather than just something that independently he wanted, he had to do this larger thing of like protecting the children and making it so this we should be in charge of like what the children are able to see and do and read. And it's only once somebody takes the next step of like, logically, what would be the next step after, okay, they can't dance, what do we need to protect their minds next. That's where he realizes, oh, I don't actually want that. All I wanted was the dancing thing because that's impacting me personally. So now he's forced to question his entire worldview because he realizes just how selfish his initial thing was to begin with.
Yeah, it's the idea if you take away the art that they can find new ideas out of and find ways to express themselves. Dancing, in a sense, is also a way for them to express themselves, to let off steam, to do whatever. And the realization that he's blocking that in the same way that these guys are trying to like burn these books, and seeing what that slope is interesting. It's kind of it's not unlike even like the newest Batman movie, where the whole arc of that movie is that he realizes he's influencing the wrong kind of people with like his whole like I am vengeance thing, and the idea that he's inspiring extremism and hiding behind masks, and he's obviously got a good intention with it, but it's being manipulated and taken further. This is kind of this thing. Lithgow has used his like stage, his platform, to angelicise about all these things and get these laws put in place, and it's created more extreme conservatives in this community who are then trying to take it further and just outright doing things the Nazis were doing.
And every time I turn on the news nowadays, that's exactly what I see. Like you have, I'll keep it very brief here, but just the entire thing of like, oh yeah, 2016, the Republican Party is pushing forward this like super crazy guy, but don't worry about it. It's not going to result in anything bad. And then it did. And it continues to. And we're getting people who are crazier than the crazy guy because they believe the crazy guy. And then we keep snowballing from there. And I watched this movie and I'm so proud of Lithgow when he takes the books out of the guy's hand before he throws them in the trash can, because I'm like, thank you. Somebody's able to actually stand up for some morality here.
He Lithgowed of his problems.
Is that a plot? Is that a verb? We're just gonna... Anytime anyone does anything?
Hey, I love to say you got Lithgowed. I don't think this is him getting Lithgowed. I think this is him letting go of his trauma, his demons.
Yes, absolutely. I'll contact Oxford. It'll be in the next edition.
So yeah, I mean, and that side of things is good. Yeah, we were sort of alluding to it before with Ariel, but like Chuck's not happy that she's moved on to someone else, and actually sort of waits for her after school one day and tries to confront her about it. And when she tries to basically just shut down the conversation, he gets violent. He hits her, tries to leave.
Well, she does like smack him in the face first.
Sure.
But then he responds with like a full punch.
Yeah.
Like he 100% hits back.
Right. So regardless, I mean, a slap does not justify a punch.
Oh, no.
Not in any realm.
At no point should there be an escalation on either side here. Like 100%. But it is something that, again, I think it is furthering Ariel's character. The fact that she is doing this. Like, she's not able to just walk away and say, like, screw you, Chuck, I don't want to see you anymore. Even to the point where after the punch, he gets back in his car. He's about to drive away. She pulls out a metal pole and starts bashing in his headlights.
Yeah,
like,
which makes him get out and hit her again, like harder, to the point where she's on the ground and she's bleeding and she's bruised. She's got a black eye now. It's pretty. If honestly, if anything, the weirdest thing about this all to me is that when it cuts to the next scene and she's like sort of like, you know, patching up her face and she's with Kevin Bacon, I almost thought it was strange that Kevin Bacon wasn't even a little like angry. Like it felt like he was just kind of there and be like, oh, you were in a fight, you know, almost like two people were in a mutual like sort of normal fight and you're just sort of like, you know, helping out with like patching them up. I'm like, no, I did beat her up. This feels a little more heinous than that. I feel like you should be a little bit like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a problem with the idea of being too protective and is like coming from masculinity and all that, but it's weird that there's not a hint of that there in that scene.
No, there was. I was in middle school and I was walking home with my best friend one day, and then I guess he pissed off someone who was in our neighborhood, and dude with his friends came and just like jumped my best friend and beat him up a little bit. It wasn't anything nearly as bad as in the movie, just like pushing him down and like a rough punch or something like that. But I came out of that, like I wasn't able to do anything, but I came out of that and I was like super pissed off for him. I was like, dude, how do you want to handle this? What do you want to do about this? I'm like trying to help him out as best I can here. It goes to Kevin Bacon in this movie and it's just like, ow, man, that sucks. Anyway, so I want to talk about dancing some more.
Yeah, that's basically his attitude. But yeah, that sucks. Hey, oh, damn. That sucks to be you right now.
I think forwards that idea that there just really isn't all that much chemistry between them. It doesn't feel like they have this sort of passionate, like, teenage romance that you expect from this sort of movie.
But at that point, it's not even a chemistry thing, though. That's just a writing thing. Like, the writing would say, oh, he's upset visibly because he really cares about her. And even if it'd still be a complaint if there was no chemistry, but at least the writing would be try to create it. Whereas it feels like the writing here isn't helping at all. It's just not giving them that. So, but yeah, it's around this area of the movie where he gets the idea where, there should be a dance. We should do this. And as he's talking to different people and trying to get it sort of put in place, he sort of learns from some of the other students that there's this like town hall meeting every month, and this is where if there's any chance to like get anything changed, you have to go to that meeting, you have to present your case. So there's some build up to like, okay, he's going to do that, and like he's given some hints and tips from various people. This is also the part of the movie where he's teaching Willard how to dance.
Yep.
We get that montage for that.
Again, it's one of those things, the song is Let's Hear It for the Boy, and it's just a long form montage, lasts the whole song length, of him just slowly finding his rhythm. And it was great because as Let's Hear It for the Boy started playing, I know that song, so I started like snapping along to it, and then the camera pans up and you see Kevin Bacon trying to teach Willard how to snap in beat to the song, and I'm like, hey, look at that, they're doing it. I just had fun with it.
I get not being able to dance, but not being able to like move your hand and beat to the song feels like really like.
I mean, there are people who are just like completely tone deaf. They have absolutely no sense of rhythm. But in the same vein, that's not something you can overcome with just, oh, I'm trying to learn.
Yeah,
like that's.
Is tone deafness and rhythm even like tied to though? Because like rhythm is very different. Rhythm's just a beat.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not going to confidently say yes on that one. But all I'm saying is that there are people who like whatever's going on in their brain, they physically cannot keep like a beat properly.
I mean, I'm sure there's several reasons for it, but I feel like someone who can't dance can still just sort of clap in time because it's just, you know.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the fact that he's able to overcome it to the extent he does by the end of the movie means that it is like laughably silly that he has absolutely no sense of rhythm at the beginning. But yeah.
So the big thing is that Ariel gives Kevin Bacon a smoking gun, which is she bookmarks a passage from the Bible that talks about dancing, and this is like this is the gotcha. This is the you're full of shit, Reverend, because the Bible says we should dance. We celebrate the Lord via dance.
I love the scene where she hands him the Bible because he's like flipping through, seeing all the bookmarks, and he's like, "This is great. How did you know where to find this?" And she's just like, "Are you kidding?" And like they never fully pay it off and like say why, but like, yeah, she's the preacher's daughter, dude. Come on, you didn't think about that one?
She's had to hear this, yeah. Which is probably a good time to like jump over to her other scenes with her father. There was one early on actually we didn't mention too much. It was after that initial like him showing up and it being awkward. There's a scene where they're just sitting quietly in the house and he's at his typewriter typing away and she's doing something, maybe homework over on another table, and she keeps turning around and saying, "Hey Dad," and starts asking him things and apologizing for any misunderstanding and trying to like patch things up effectively, but he's very coldly just kind of stonewalling her and not really giving in and opening up with her.
He's writing his sermon. He's like on the typewriter at that time, and it really gives this sort of, like we said later on, he doesn't care about her when she is home. It's only when she's out that he gives a damn about what she's doing at that point. My only critique in this scene, it was a good character moment, but I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you like don't care about a person. If somebody approaches you, and I'm just going to do this with you right now. If somebody approaches you and this is the like tempo of the conversation, "Hey, Peter."
Yeah.
"Good night." Clearly something's wrong. Like there's no reason that you're going to pause for a full 10 seconds and there's not something wrong there.
Yeah. So the bigger scene later on though is that she comes to him when he's on his own in the church and kind of has this confrontation with him about all the things he sort of like tries to fight back against, and about like how he tries to control her, and even like it says to him, "I'm not a virgin, Dad. Like do you aware of that? I'm not supposed to confess my things." And he's like, "Don't say that in here." He's like, "I may confess things in here." She starts shouting it out.
As soon as she says, "I'm not a virgin," I love how they cut to Lithgow because you just see his face break. You just see him just like, "I failed. And now I am like scrambling for whatever I can do next," which turns out being borderline more violence.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't get violent though, to be fair.
No, but I think the only reason he doesn't get violent is because he's interrupted by the book burning thing. Because like she's down on her knees doing a whole song and dance about like, "Oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," and he picks her up by like her collar, and then the woman runs in for the book burning. But I think if that scene were left on its own, he may have gotten violent again because she is just 100% acting out here.
Yeah, maybe. I think obviously this maybe ties into the scene with Chuck a little bit, where she is intentionally trying to provoke him to whatever extreme end she might be able to get him to, and he has not yet had these realizations that have let him like sort of come to peace with some of the things, like letting her be who she is and so on. Because I don't think she's this completely innocent character. Like we've been saying, the way she does provoke people is certainly like a negative character element. Like she's sort of like trying to fight them as much as she can. But there is certainly this element here where he's supposed to know better because he's the dad. He's supposed to be able to like see through this and kind of deal with it. And up until now, he's clearly not been able to. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the big scene between them towards the end. And obviously he talks to his wife about how he's going to say no to that, because by the time this meeting's coming up, everyone knows that he's going to come and like talk about it. They all know this is going to be a debate, or not a debate, as the case may be from their perspective. And he's like, "Yeah, she's going to hate me for this." And the wife like makes this point of like, like you think dancing like gets all their sexual like motives going, but like that's not the only thing that gets teenagers horny. Come on now. Like, do you remember us just looking at each other and just wanting to bone right there in the field?
I was going to say, let's make a list of all the things that don't get teenagers horny. All right, the list is done. Like,
wow,
pretty much everything.
Come on now, come on. I think at least we can put on, like, dead bodies and maybe...
All right. John Lithgow's scowl. That's
oh, no,
that...
I think some young ladies...
Oh, that one does it?
I think some young ladies and, obviously some young, maybe gay or otherwise men would be quite... he's got a... Honestly, it's actually kind of funny watching this movie with John Lithgow because I'm so used to him not having this much hair that it's actually kind of like...
Right.
It's like, it's funny how you're already old enough to be the teenager's father when you're still like active as an actor for another 40 years still. Obviously, he's like a grandfather age now, but I felt like he was dad age for like 25 years.
I mean, he was born in 45, so he would have been about 40 when this movie came out.
Well, yeah, which is fair. But even like through the 90s when he's on Third Rock from the Sun, he still kind of felt like he's just,
He has that Steve Martin thing going on where he just seems like he was born old and he's had an entire career for all of that.
Yeah. But that said, he does have more hair here. Like he's not went horseshoe head yet.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, do we have the big meeting? Mm-hmm. And Kevin Bacon.
I love how the meeting opens up with you can tell that this is usually a totally empty like hall when there's nothing big going on. But the first thing we get in this is stuff from the last meeting. So it's like, and so we will be increasing the price of a dog license from $350 to $450. Thank you, Marianne. And it's like the whole crowd just sitting there like, okay, yes, come on, get to the cool part.
Question on a dog license, because I've never heard of such a thing.
Yes.
Are they saying that you have to pay that once when you get a dog to have a license? Or is this like a yearly payment they expect from people in the town? What's going on here?
I don't know if it's a state-to-state thing or if like a town-to-town thing. I know that for my state, there is a annual license thing. You can get a lifetime one for like a higher price, but it is like an annual renewal thing. As long as you have a pet, you need to have it licensed.
Wait, that's so... In the US, you have to have a license for a pet?
Not all places, but yes. To the extent, you have to be like... It's literally just a tax. That's all. It's a pet tax. It's literally all it is. They just call it a license so you don't get up in arms about it.
Oh, okay. All right. That's something else to make fun of America for. It's fine.
Yep.
Pet license. Pet license.
Look, the fact that there are actual cities that don't let people dance still, you have a lot to make fun of America for, and I'm right there with you.
Well, I feel like whenever the TV license comes up, Americans make fun in the UK, and it is stupid. But you don't have to do it now. If you just don't have regular broadcast TV, you can just get around it. But pet license is ridiculous. So it's just
it is.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I think it's only for dogs. I don't think cats are for it, but yeah.
Well, good. Everyone should have a cat. That's fine. Anyway, so Bacon comes up. He starts pleading his case, effectively saying he wants to dance, and everyone's basically like, nah, we don't want that. Even his own uncle speaks out, says, yeah, I'm in favor of not letting this happen. Let's keep these rules in place. And then he wants to speak, and it's actually Lithgow's wife who says, no, he should have the right to speak. He should be able to plead his case. So he speaks into the mic, he says a bunch of things.
I love the bit right before that where the wife comes in, because the conservative wife stands up, and she's about to start a whole hysterical, like, think of the children thing. And then Lithgow's wife is just like, Mary Beth, sit down. And just immediately the whole crowd's like, ooh.
So Bacon, he says, dance is used for this, it's used for that, it's been done since the dawn of time. So he says sort of a grand statement, and then he whips out the Bible. He's like, from verse 14, blah, 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 right? And of course, there's a look in Lithgow's face. He's like, wait a minute, what's this he's got now?
Don't you speak the deep magic to me.
He's using the Bible. And he says the thing, he reads from the passage, and he talks about how it's a celebration, that's all this is meant to be, blah, 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 blah. And it cuts ahead to like a scene where he's just at work, and the guy that he works for is like you know that like it was never going to go through. Like they all he had all the votes in his pocket before the town meeting even started. There was never going to be a thing, and that's when his boss says, "Hey, technically this warehouse that's part of our mill or that I own is outside of the state line. So technically, like you could do this without any of the laws being changed." You know, maybe the only thing would be that they could potentially try and stop people from going to it. But ultimately, he does get like kind of like they're at church like later that week in Lithgow, and he's like passage basically admits that he's made some mistakes. You know, being a preacher for the towns, like being a first time parent where you make mistakes, you learn from them.
Well, you're skipping pretty decently ahead there, because that's kind of the wrap up of like everything.
Oh, sure.
I do think that it is important to say the stuff that happens in between, which is once they have the location for it, they go full tilt on it. They're like, we're doing a prom anyway, screw it. And we're trying to get everybody to show up and do that.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the brick through the window scene.
Oh, that hadn't happened yet? I assumed that was earlier.
No.
Yeah, there's a brick through the window to where Kevin Bacon's living, his uncle's place. But Chuck's friend, whoever does this, it happens to go into the window where the two small kids are sleeping. So they're freaking out. It was the most dangerous room they could have thrown a brick into. And what does the brick say? Go to hell?
Burn in hell.
Burn in hell. Yeah. And this makes the uncle want him to back down even more. Are you sure that's not before the town meeting? I could have sworn it was.
You know what? It looks like it is. Yeah, just looking at it here. But it is important to say, because I like the scene where Chuck beats up Ariel. I think that this is a major tone shift of like, oh, there are consequences to this. This isn't a thing where it's like, oh, everybody loves the kid trying to get dancing to happen.
Yeah,
like,
but this is where there's a disconnect for me, though, because this felt too extreme for what was actually going on in the movie. I'm like, wait, this is bothering people that much? Like,
well, that's the thing. I didn't think that it was really bothering people, but I think that again, it's that idea of people get into this mindset of the extremism is okay, and therefore they're allowed to do these things in order to preserve the way that they think that things should be. Like, the conservative guy had absolutely no second thoughts about burning books, and so it makes sense that a bunch of stupid teenagers are like, yeah, throwing a brick through a window seems like a totally reasonable reaction to planning a school dance. Like, it's just forwarding that idea that the extremism in this town is out of anyone's control, even the Reverend, at this point.
Well, yeah, but for me, it's more just the uncle's reaction, where he thinks it's because of his nephew, and I guess it kind of is, but I wouldn't say the people who threw the brick were doing it because they had deep concerns about everything. It's more because it looks like Chuck's truck. It looks like it's Chuck's truck and one of his friends
Chuck. Yeah,
that are throwing the brick. So it's more about high school petty bully bullshit than it is about anything greater than that.
But then the uncle goes off on all the different things that have been happening. Like, something happened with his aunt getting like calls from people around, and then, like you said, the mother got fired from her job because of this stuff as well.
That's where all this comes out.
So clearly this is very much just a thing that this is the straw that broke the camel's back for the uncle, where he's saying like, all of this stuff has happened and it's clearly because of you. So you need to stop being so selfish and just fit in. Stop trying to break the mold.
Yeah. But I don't remember that much happening between them getting the location and Lithgow making his big speech where he kind of approves of it.
The other thing that happens, and I think it's the turning point for Lithgow, is once they have the location all set up and everything like that, we actually have a sequence where Ren goes to Lithgow at the house.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We don't even get to see what this conversation was. We just kind of come in at the end of it. And it's like, it seems like they've had a fairly adult conversation where Ren has come over to just try and explain, like, and just he just wanted to be heard out about like why they're doing this and what they want to do and what the plan is with this, you know, beyond state line location where it's not going to break your laws, but like it'd be good if you didn't like villainize us all for doing this and maybe made it sure it was okay. And the scene actually starts with Kevin Bacon looking at a photograph of the son that's died, you know, Lithgow's son that was killed. And Bacon like gives the photograph back and says, like, I can't explain why this happened any more than you could explain to me why my dad left. And that kind of links back into, after the brick in the window, there was like a heart-to-heart with his mum, where he talks about how he's having a tough time because he used to blame himself for dad wanting to leave, but then he realized it had nothing to do with him. But it feels like at the end of this scene, there's some sort of at least mutual respect between them. Yeah. Because he didn't even like come and see Ariel. Like Ariel heard his voice, but like after he leaves, like Lithgow turns around and says, "Oh, that was your friend Ren. He came over to talk to me about this." And yeah, so I mean,
ask permission to take you to the prom.
Yeah. So yeah, he makes his big speech at the sermon, and that kicks in a montage. And the weird thing for me from this point on is that the movie's basically over because the narrative turn has happened, right? Yeah. Now it's just about maybe celebrating the results of it. But the weird thing is that we get a whole montage where for some reason every high schooler has a dirt bike in this scene where they all are riding out to this location to decorate it. But so we get a montage of them decorating and all that. And the only thing that really gets in the way, other than like a nice scene of John Lithgow and his wife watching the building from a distance and basically like sort of re-embracing and realizing, oh wait, she's like 18 now. She's about to leave. We're on our own again. We should probably find our passion in the hug and have a bit of a kiss.
How about salsa dancing?
It's all whatever. And also the sweet gesture that he bought his daughter a corsage, before she leaves. And that's kind of like, oh, that's like an extra little gesture that he's thrown in as well as like, you know, letting all this happen. For me, there was a bit of a weird thing here where they decided to do one more thing with Chuck when I felt like we didn't need anything else with this.
Yeah, so the sequence of events that it, like in the directly plays out is we have a shot of the dance. Nobody's dancing because Kevin Bacon hasn't shown up yet. So everyone's just like, oh God, we can't do this. I don't know what's happening. And then he shows up, he starts dancing with Ariel and everyone else just joins it. Then we get the sequence with the Reverend and his wife just watching from afar and they're enjoying themselves. And then we get Willard and Rusty coming up and they're about to go into the dance, and that's where Chuck shows up. And I mean, the entire sequence is basically Chuck is trying to provoke, he's trying to start a fight, Willard's not going for it, so then Chuck just throws punches anyway. And then Ren comes out, does a flying kick off the balcony into Chuck's face.
Just one interjection here, the payoff to the earlier stuff with Willard is that he's saying, no, I promised I wouldn't fight tonight, and he's not doing it. And he gets punched a few times, and he's like, Rusty, can you give me the okay here? And she's like, yeah, kill him. And then he starts fighting back. But he was basically refusing to fight back until Rusty said it was okay to fight.
Right. Yep.
So that's the payoff to that earlier thing.
Yeah. And then Ren comes in, and now it's 2 against 5. But of course, they're amazing, fantastic. So they're able to take out Chuck's whole crew. And then they go in and they finish the dance scene. But I agree that I think it's weird the Chuck thing happened here.
I feel like the movie's ready to be over. I didn't think we need a wrap up with Chuck. It felt like...
I agree, but I think what I was waiting for was, again, this reaffirmation of once you light the extremism fire, you can't just put it out again. It's not something that you can just give a sermon to and all of a sudden things are fixed. So I was kind of waiting for the fact that Chuck does show up again because he buys into this whole thing. Plus, he has a personal vendetta against Ren. So I was kind of hoping that they were going to pay off the fact that the Reverend was there. Hold on
a second. Does he buy into it? I don't think I ever got that impression. I felt like all of his thing the entire movie was just that he's pissed at Ren and pissed at Ariel for being dumped.
Yes, but seems like he's using the anti-dance stuff and the reason that everyone else hates Ren as like justification for his actions.
Yeah. I get that he's like sort of happy to jump in on all that because it's convenient for him, but I never got the impression that he actually cared about the town not dancing.
I guess I wouldn't say that he particularly cares about that stuff. You're right. But I do think that he's being used as a justification on his end as to why he's like doing this at the dance itself. Because he could have attacked, like, in terms of how it was, he could have attacked Ren before this, after this, literally any point. It wouldn't have made a difference. The fact that it's at the dance is just forwarding this idea of like, I'm taking everything that you wanted to do and I am going to burn it down in your hands, pretty much. I'm going to make it so it's spoiled for whatever reason. Either way, I kept on waiting for the scene where the Reverend comes in. And I don't know what I expected him to do here, whether he joins in the fight literally or just like talks down.
I mean, I'm picturing this scene of Lithgow getting in and throwing punches to teenagers like it would make any sense, but sure.
But no, I wanted that scene where they set him up that he's already at the dance by the time this scene happens. I was expecting him to more fully join in on Ren's side and like be there fighting side by side with him rather than just the tacit, okay, I disapprove, but I'm still going to let you do this anyway.
Yeah, it didn't feel like I needed a payoff to Chuck at this point, and it just felt like it was delaying the ending, which is just them all dancing to Footloose. They all dance for a few minutes, and then eventually it cuts to credits, you know? That's it. That's the end of the movie, which makes sense that that's the end of the movie. But it's almost like maybe they could have done something with this Chuck thing at the end where, I don't know, where... like not only could maybe John Lithgow get involved, maybe the conservative dad shows up to try and protest or something, and then that's maybe where Lithgow comes in and Lithgow can like drag him away because he's the other old man kind of thing. Not that 40's old by any means, but just in relation to the teenagers.
Maybe we could have the Chuck and his gang are like driving up to the dance. They're like drinking and they're clearly about to cause some problems, but then they get pulled over like as they're approaching the dance, and the cop points out like, you guys are still in our jurisdiction. They're out. So we're going to take you guys to jail.
Yeah. Or maybe, just as something as simple as like Lithgow sees it and like, calls in, I don't know, the policeman to go over and like take away the bullies or something just to, but you know, an act of like, no, let them have their party, let them have their dance or something. But I'm only saying that because it makes something out of this Chuck thing that ties more to him. But honestly, like him being satisfied that he's let this happen and enjoying the moment with his wife. I mean, to me, the biggest moment he has here, other than just sort of like the romantic moment with his wife, is when he says, no, we shouldn't get closer, she'll think I'm checking up on her. And the wife's like, no, don't worry, she won't even see us. But that concern that he's like, no, my concern now is not wanting her to feel like I'm like spying on her and being overbearing. So like, you know, to me the main story was done. All that was left, and I get that you have to have your final dance scene because that's your dessert for getting to the end of the story, but obviously I was just kind of waiting for the credits to start rolling at that point.
Oh no, I get that. I do think I'm not going to disagree that there aren't pacing issues here. My biggest one is I don't think there's any reason for the town council meeting to not be the big turning point of the movie. The fact that they lost the town council vote, like, yes, it's stupid and schlocky to like do the whole thing where I'm sure it would be like a 3-4 vote with the Reverend being the deciding one. But I mean, literally, if you read the story about the town it's based off of, that's how it happened. It was a 2-2 vote. And then one guy, his final words were, let him dance. Like, you can just do silly stupid like that, especially in a movie like this. But having it be that they lost the vote,
and then he comes round afterwards. Like, what would have maybe been better is that you do the admittedly slightly cheesier, but it felt like he was already starting to be convinced anyway. Maybe you have the scene where Kevin Bacon comes to see him before the meeting, right? So he's already made that connection, and then in the scene he says he's thing from the Bible. It seems to convince some of them, and you have the vote where it happens. You can still probably have the scene where he does the sermon, but have it be more about now he's trying to sort of like convince everyone else who wasn't for it. They say, hey, it's okay to let them do this. And maybe this shows that not only has he voted to let them have the dance, but he's now actively changed what he's promoting in his sermons to sort of be inclusive, to be understanding of why people are doing certain things that aren't, you know, they aren't bad, they aren't hurting anyone, you know, it's fine. Like, you can still have that dramatic moment, but it does kind of feel like we have to come down from the potential of almost winning. And I get that, you have your hero effectively get close and fail so we can build up and succeed later. But we're already like within like 5-10 minutes of it happening anyway, so it feels like really weird in the movie to have this moment here where it feels like the natural place to win, to get the victory, and then just delay it by a couple of scenes. If it, you know, it's a bit strange.
Not only delay by a couple of scenes, but also a win on a technicality. You know, it wasn't as much of like a full on like, yes, we did it. Because I mean, ostensibly, come next year, the town's still going to have the exact same problem.
Actually, I could tell you how this works. How you still keep them losing here is you show Lithgow voting to let them dance, but he's outvoted because he's convinced too many of the others to have this attitude already, and that's the tragedy of it. And then Lithgow helps them with the technicality to let them dance. Like that would have worked.
Yeah, that would have done that turn face that I was looking for with Lithgow a lot better too.
Yeah, the idea that he actually is convinced in the meeting, but because he's already polluted all the other minds that are on the board, it's like doesn't matter. They're like that's it. Now he's on the losing side. Like that would actually be quite poetic and dramatic.
Yeah.
And it'd be almost consequences for all the things that he's been doing.
Yeah. It would have done that whole thing of like you can't put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to the extremist views. So yeah.
It's going to take time. And then you can still have the sermon where maybe you see that maybe he's just kind of changing a couple of minds, maybe a little bit. Like maybe he started the process of like gradually like fixing it, but
you get the eye rolls from like the super conservative couple that we saw before. Clearly they're beyond saving, but you get a couple of like the sweet old ladies who are like, I enjoy dancing with my Frederick every Saturday night down at the old swing club.
Yeah, I was convinced, honestly, that I thought Lithgow and his wife were going to go in and start dancing with everyone. Like, I really thought we were going to get that, but
yeah,
well.
Nah, that'd be just a bit too weird for your preacher to come to your high school prom.
That would be a bit strange, but I mean, yeah.
I gotta say, I obviously this is based off of like the message, the moral of the movie, where it's all about, you know, the kids, they just wanted to dance and it's super pure or whatever, but like you just know like at least 3 pregnancies resulted from that dance, right? Like he was fully right when it comes down to like, yeah, a bunch of unsupervised kids went to prom. Clearly something's going to happen afterwards.
I mean, yeah, there's probably an argument that it should still be chaperoned because a prom would still have like teachers there, sort of just as security, effectively.
Yeah. That's the thing. They're only making it's that argument of if you ban something, they're only gonna do it through more shadier means. Where if you let it happen legally, at least you can put some safeguards in place.
Yeah. So that's Footloose.
Yeah. Everybody cut.
All right, rate the movie, David.
I can't believe you disliked it that much. Like you had no fun with this at all.
I didn't hate it. It's perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine movie, but I didn't really feel much from it, you know?
All right, that's fair. I had a big old goofy grin on my face for more than half the runtime just because of how silly it got. I was not against it at all. In terms of rating, there are some pacing issues, like I said. I think that it has interesting themes that I do agree could have been played more on in terms of like, you know, extremism and Reagan years and stuff like that, of like parents seeing Satan and everything. I really would have liked that to be expanded upon more. But with what we were given, I mean, yeah, it was kind of just a stupid teen movie where everyone was pretty much caricatures of their relevant tropes. So all in all, I'd say this one is probably like a 7 for me. I had fun, and this is something where I wouldn't say within the next year or so, but I wouldn't have trouble showing Footloose to somebody who hasn't seen it before. I think it's worth it, at least a single watch for sure.
I don't think it's bad. Like, I just think there's nothing that special about it either. It's, you know, compare it to the others we've done. I think Flashdance had a better character and a better sort of like theme and like character arc. I think this has a character that I'm seeing quality in, but it's not the main character. It's the John Lithgow character, and it's frustrating when we focus on the other stuff instead because I don't find it quite as compelling. So, but I think it's fine. I don't think it's bad. I think much like Dirty Dancing, I think it's a 6 out of 10. I think, you know, it's perfectly okay, but I'm not going to be singing and dancing about it.
Fair enough. So in terms of making the collection, how are you coming down, Pete?
Well, how do you feel? You're the more positive one. Where were you starting?
I am the more positive one. Here's the thing. I wouldn't put this like above Dirty Dancing. I think that Dirty Dancing is still kind of like, when it comes down to stupid fun, I think that one still had more to say, it did it better, and then it still had its stupid fun at the same time. But I feel bad of saying that this is less than that either, because it feels like it's still doing like something that deserves to be seen. It's got a great soundtrack to it, in my opinion. Clearly that's not shared everywhere. So I would say it at least matches in the cutting it close, but I'm pretty sure I pushed for Dirty Dancing to be making the cut. So I at least want cutting it close. Can I get you there?
I mean, obviously, I definitely don't want it in the collection. It's not making the cut. I'll say that.
All right.
I mean, I guess cutting it close is fair enough. That said, though, if you look at the average scores here between the movies, this is lower than Dirty Dancing. So
that's true, but it is above everything else that we put as cut from the collection. So
it's just about defining where that line is.
I mean, the line doesn't exist. The line is, you go down on our spreadsheet a little bit, you got Miami Connection at 3.5. So it's all about taste, but I think this is at least cutting it close.
I would say I was more stimulated by Climax, which we cut from the collection. So I would happily cut this from the collection, but you seem to want to fight for it. So
I do.
You can have cutting it close.
Thank you.
It's all right. I'll make you pay for it in other ways later. Don't worry.
No, this is me getting even for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Now we're square. Don't make me pay for this.
You fight for the weirdest movies. That's the hill you're upset you didn't die on.
Man, you just wait till we get to Shrek season. We're going to have a war.
Yeah, that's not happening. So, yes, that's Flashdance, everyone. Hopefully...
That was not Flashdance.
Oh, that's Footloose, sorry. They don't start with F, okay? And we did them back to back. They're interchangeable in my head.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that was Footloose. Next week is the next vote winner that our patrons have voted on, so we don't know what the outcome of that is quite yet, but look forward to whatever that may be. So, as far as anything else goes, though, of course, I mentioned at the start of the show, you can get bonus shows and content from us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. We do 2 monthly shows, me and David. We've got the Criterion show, Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion collection, and then $5 and up tiers get the Extra Reel show, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. You know, recently Troll 2, Mac and Me, things like that. Some of the real, bottom of the barrel stuff that can maybe be fun to talk about. So you can check out that. Also, we do a science fiction movie podcast called The Atomic Cinema Experiment, which runs most weeks as well, much like Collector's Cut. We've been doing Planet of the Apes movies over there, the more recent ones, the Mad Max movies. We did Back to the Future recently, as I mentioned earlier. So a lot of big stuff over there. So go check that out if you would like as well. But that is the show. That is Collector's Cut. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, and maybe, could you dance in this town if you had diplomatic immunity?